Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody, to a great session. So one of the SDGs is good health, and it's a primary concern for all of us. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hans Kirstad, who's an internationally known stem cell expert and serial entrepreneur who led the therapy development for spinal cord injury, cancer, immune disorders, motor neuron disease, retinal disease, and COVID-19. He's founded 4 successful biotechnology companies and holds board positions at several prominent companies in the space. Previously, he was professor of anatomy and neurobiology at the University of California in Irvine, where he co-founded and directed the $77 million Sue and Bill Gross Stem Cell Research Center. He was featured on 60 Minutes in a full segment covering his treatment for spinal cord injury. And Dr. Kirstad's work in spinal cord injury has earned him the distinction of being one of the top 100 scientists of the year in Discover magazine. So join me in a warm welcome in greeting Dr. Hans Kirstad.
Thank you very much, Neil. Real pleasure to be here, and thanks everybody for the interest. I found this to be just an incredible task as I was asked to look into AI for healthcare. So I'll start off by saying that the amount of data that the world has generated right now is just unbelievable. The global data sphere, the total sum of all the data in the world, is now exceeding 64 zettabytes. And I admit having to look up what zetta meant. And it's a trillion gigabytes, just an unfathomable amount of data. We all are very well aware that much of this digital revolution is taking place in healthcare. And it's just no surprise to me, perhaps could be to the AI field, that healthcare data accumulation surpasses every other sector, being a full 36% compounded annual growth rate year after year, clearly topping every other sector. And why is that? We're seeing a huge amount of data being generated by personal device interactions every day. Staggering figure, we touch our digital devices over 1,500 times per day. And by 2025, it'll be right around 5,000 interactions with our own personal digital devices per day, each of them capturing information, doing something with that information, siloing it or combining it with other technologies. And on the right side of the screen, you can clearly see that sensors are being designed and employed for almost every part of our body, every sensory organ we have being augmented by just an amazing array of digital devices. Another major contributor to this data ohm is the combined fields of several different things: the genome, looking at your genetics, the proteome, your proteins, the exposome, everything in the environment, that your experience that affects you primarily through methylation of your genes and that type of thing, but fundamentally changes the way that you are interacting with the world. Biomarkers, we're seeing tremendous advances in what can be done with blood, urine, mucous membrane, saliva, etc., in getting a fingerprint, if you will, of what it is that's going on in you right now. The microbiome data has just exploded recently. Microbiomes are known to affect your health They're known to affect your aging, your intelligence, your weight retention or loss. And then the field of imaging as well, just a phenomenal amount of data tucked into images of our own bodies, and very, very thick with information that we can, and in the most cases, can't extract. So humans are just certainly being digitalized by specialized technologies. And those data ohms, this great conglomeration of all these sectors that create the data ohm, they enable just unprecedented levels of exactitude and precision, personal medicine, not even personalized, but truly personal medicines that can actually predict with proper manipulation of the data ohm what your responses are going to be. Not only follow them once they happen, but predict what the response to a drug may be. Identification of very rare abnormalities and Gaussian analyses. This is the averaging. Perhaps if it's a brain, you will take images of thousands of people, reduce them down into a median or an average of those things, and then use that as a population parameter in order to extract and generalize, in order to predict. Just huge amounts of possibilities. So with the interactions with devices and an explosion of this data ohm, we are very enthused that we've got all of this. But the problem with the field right now of data is that it all exists in silos. We move from data to information very, very slowly, and then much slower, and sometimes not at all, utilizing that data for some sort of clinical utility. So the problem here for the silos is that healthcare providers just simply can't access or interpret the data. They're very busy. The current healthcare environment is just frankly oppressive on healthcare professionals. They've never had to work more. They've never had to adopt more changes. They're frankly moving over to, rather than working for a patient, they're working for an institution. And that institution comes with a tremendous amount of compliance and regulation. And so the day-to-day time that they have for a patient is becoming less and less. So how are we going to get them to access and interpret this mountain of data? It's just not happening right now in an effective way. And then the other problem is that patients can't understand the data. And I couldn't help but pulling up this quote by Voltaire almost 250 years ago, when he said that doctors prescribe medicines of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less, to human beings of which they know nothing. And amazing, over 250 years later, how this quote applies so well to AI in healthcare. So how do we get there from clinical utility on the ground, right up there beside accepting some delays and interpreting data and information? How do we move it up and make it useful? Clearly, the answer, no surprise, is money. And the good news for the AI in healthcare field is that the money exists. I think this is a major takeaway, that we don't really need to regulate more money into the system for AI in healthcare. The healthcare spending represents 20% of almost every nation. It's usually 10 to 25%. In the United States, it's rated smack on 20% of the economy, with $3.8 trillion exchanging hands. That's just extraordinary. 1.3 of it being solid revenues. Healthcare is the third largest industry in the United States, with almost 15%. 15 out of 100 people are employed in the sector. Clearly, we know that healthcare spending is absolutely unsustainable and increasing because of government policies, because of the demographics, more sickness, more use of longer-term care, and rising cost of drugs, procedures, technology, etc. But the takeaway for this talk is that the money does exist in the healthcare system. You know, simply put, we've got an extremely fat system here with waste, tremendous amounts of waste, ripe for the tuning. So do we need money for AI? And I'd posit no. The global AI market right now is worth $137 billion all on its own. Global AI is growing at a CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, of almost 40%. So it is one of the current explosions in industry, where industry and commercial industry is taking advantage of this. They see the tremendous wealth in the healthcare system, the tremendous amount of wastage in the healthcare system, and the AI community is rallying. The 40% CAGR year after year is just it's an unprecedented growth rate. 40% of large companies plan to invest in AI, and AI tech can increase revenues with very solid forecasts by very good banks by almost $15 trillion over the next decade. So the AI industry does not require new monetary allocations, and I don't believe that the healthcare sector does. So what has happened then? If that is the case, what are some examples? Has AI actually made a big difference in healthcare? What has it done to really move the needle in this sector? And what I'm going to do now is just run over a few of what I consider the most exciting developments about artificial intelligence in healthcare. Perhaps the most exciting development in this sector, in my view, is the digital twin. So this is an AI representative of multiple different categories of healthcare data. So researchers use diagnostic data from MRIs and electrocardiograms and other heart examinations. In this case, I'm showing you here with the heart on the right-hand side. All of these specific to the person being treated. And then these imaging algorithms put together a digital image of the patient's heart from this data material, opening up just completely new possibilities of what's possible in clinical diagnostics. These twins, again, just the twin market, the digital twin market is growing at almost a 40% CAGR. And again, it enables personal and precision medicines, preventative care and training, because you can model this person's heart, etc. And how is it going to break? How are drugs going to interact with it? Are there any genetic or exposomic reasons, the environment, why that drug shouldn't be given, saving, for example, prescription of unneeded medications? Predicting the impact of a treatment. Is it going to have great sensitivities and oversensitivities or under? And I think most excitingly for the R&D field, modeling diseases, both individual and Gaussian, the averaging of multiple people, population medicine, and then personalized medical devices as well. So these digital twins are here. They have been actually used to help predict atrial fibrillations in patients that researchers just couldn't see using typical medical techniques. The digital twin has been very recently brought into the cancer field, an extremely exciting development, because cancer has extremely varied causes, varied manifestations, and often responds very differently to treatment in different individuals. So this is a personal disease. A person's cancer is developed by their tumor initiating cells, and those seeds of cancer, these ticks, tumor initiating cells, are as different in me as they are in you, as a example of our own genetics. So they vary. It's a very hard beast to tackle, cancer, because the seed of cancer in every one of us is so unique. But a cancer patient with a digital twin combines and takes a multi-scale, multimodal, individual patient data set, often combining that with population data and results from clinical trials, predicting future states and diagnosing current ones. That really enables this virtual experimentation on an individual by individual basis, predicting cancer susceptibilities, prognoses, and treatment specificities. So really just an extraordinary tool for one of the most difficult diseases that humankind has ever looked to treat. We also see just tremendous advances in the field of diagnoses, and admittedly, digital twins sometimes are focused on diagnosis, not always. But in the sector of diagnosis alone, there is no star so bright as IBM's Watson. Really, this is an AI that combines natural language processing, that includes text analysis, enabling understanding of clinical documentation, published research, and etc., combining that natural language processing with very deep learning that detects clinically relevant features and imaging data far beyond what can be seen by any healthcare professional. And it's a combination of these things in Watson. It's really a set of cognitive services, an augmentation of our own intelligence that allows Watson to do so well. And you can't really underscore the importance of this, but I will try. A physician has about 5 hours a month on average to read new studies. That's just an extraordinary figure, 5 hours to keep up with the growing literature. Watson knows them all. Watson has memorized them all, can pull them back into memory in a relevant, contextually specific situation without a blink, and literally in the span of a blink. And this has proven itself time and time again. I'm sure you've all seen Jeopardy and that type of thing with Watson, but more pertinent to this conversation is the diagnosis that Watson gave for a Japanese leukemia patient. This patient, I believe, was pretty old, somewhere around 65 to 80 years old. And doctors, despite having a long history, doctors just couldn't figure out what it was that this woman had. But Watson made a correct diagnosis. Watson was able to combine written clinical notes with a mountain of literature and diagnose this particular woman with a very rare leukemia that ended up saving her life. So we do have just tremendous advances in the field of diagnoses, with Watson certainly at the head, but we also are starting to see other AI help and augment the ability of a healthcare physician to tackle very complex diagnoses. Sepsis has been a really excellent group that has looked at, in Singapore, a group that's looked at sepsis and looking at the signs and symptoms being very similar to a lot of other things. So doctors will often confuse the diagnoses. Singapore University developed these SIRA algorithms using structural data and unstructured clinical notes. That's pretty incredible, to predict and diagnose sepsis after feeding those into AI. AI is only as good as what you put into it. So it's extremely important that you limit the parameters and specify the parameters as the inputs, as they are the contingencies that guide the outputs. Singapore University did a phenomenal job with their algorithms and using this structured and unstructured data to combine a set of intelligences that the AI used in order to predict outcome. It enabled predictive accuracy 12 hours before onset of sepsis, increased early detection by up to 32% over and above healthcare professionals. And these are healthcare professionals in the field, over 30% greater detection. And it reduced false positives by almost 20% over those same domain experts. And really interestingly, this was one of the first studies that showed that unstructured clinical notes could be mined to improve accuracy. Doctors are doing their jobs well, although they don't have a lot of time for it, and are making very pointed, accurate notes in clinical settings in order to come back and remind themselves of what's going on with that particular patient because they see so many. And this mining of unstructured clinical notes was a major step forward for the field, and now has rippled through several other AIs as one of the important inputs. One of the examples that I saw really most poignant for this talk, and things that have risen above and have the potential for amazing change, is antibiotic use. This world just got hit with a pandemic. We have a bug, COVID-19, and that bug had just devastating effects on our economies, of course, and took millions and millions of lives. Antibiotic resistance is a similar pending doom for humanity. It is really something that is not appreciated by certainly the media and indeed by many scientists. But without change, we're going to see around 10 million deaths per year alone from antibody resistance. This results from both drift of the beasts themselves, genetic drift, as we see in many bugs, but more importantly, it is overuse of antibiotics and using the wrong antibiotics to try to kill a particular pathogen, and it doesn't. So that pathogen that has survived a dose of antibiotics becomes extremely resistant to that particular antibiotic. You've basically culled all of the brothers and sisters that were susceptible and left the warriors that are resistant to that particular antibiotic. So extremely important that our arsenal of antibiotics that we have are used properly. And field hospitals, although they're able to conduct tests of different antibiotics, they lack the training and the facilities, most importantly, to interpret that data. Very easy to take a swab, dump 20 antibiotics on it, and see what turns red or blue and that type of thing with color graphic outcome measures, etc. But very difficult to do those analyses in the field. So easy to deploy, very, very easy. Very easy, difficult rather to interpret. So Doctors Without Borders and Google's open source TensorFlow combined to develop an image interpretation program using cell phones. So they were able to train the model within days, scanning over 15,000 particular images of different antibiotics reacting to different bugs, and is enabling a worldwide point of care expertise using a cell phone, uploading the pictures and interpreting them with the AI behind the cell phone that it accesses. Just this type of work will allow appropriate antibodies to be used in the field, meaning for greater accuracy for the patient. And we're not prescribing drugs that aren't helping, but more important from a global perspective, we will stop training these bugs to be the great warrior survivors of imperfect antibody assault. Another major field that has just done extraordinarily well is drug discovery. This uses a particular portion of artificial intelligence called generative design. It's an iterative design process that uses a program that generates designs where you put in the constraints. So you put in the goalposts, you outline the field that AI is playing in, and then what it does is it generates an iterative process involving a program that comes up with all designs that fit those parameters. And this has been used most poignantly in artificial intelligence assisted small molecule design for lead molecule identification that basically becomes extremely efficient, extremely accurate, and very high throughput to look at things like protein folding predictions, the feasibility of synthesis, something called retrosynthetic complexity estimations, where you have a complex molecule, you know what it is. AI can be used to do retrosynthetic complexity, meaning you look at precursors to that molecule and predict how they'll react with particular reagents or they don't. And then you can build up something that is actually feasible to attack with a drug, and that educates eventual full synthesis. It's been used extremely well in just rather than building these intermediates, just simply posting protein structure databases that others can use in mine that links the shape to the function. And it's available to all, and it's available now, and it is currently accelerating drug discovery globally with some really tremendous examples. We've seen a lot of this AI being used for novel antiviral medicines for COVID-19. And I really do have to commend a group out of Portsmouth, UK, that are looking at novel enzymes to break down plastic polymers, something that's really threatening our health globally with the degradation of plastics getting into our foodstuffs. And we have a tremendous amount of microplastics within us right now. These enzymes would halt that chain and clean up the population in so doing. Perhaps the biggest, most exciting area that is put in practice right now is image analysis. Images are extremely difficult, very technical. They take highly trained individuals to analyze, and we have just seen tremendous leaps and bounds by AI. These studies collectively have shown that a radiologist, the specialist who's gone to med school for years to do this, to interpret these images, they get it right about 70% of the time, where AI gets it right a full 21% greater at 91% of the time. These collective studies have shown that there's much enhanced accuracy, tremendously improved sensitivity, and here's the big one, specificity. What's actually going on within that photograph? Detecting small abnormalities that the human eye just simply can't, reducing noise, getting what's important. The limitations certainly include dynamic behaviors. So if you have something like cancer, it is very dynamic, it's very aggressive. You get limitations with false positives, overdiagnosis due to estimation sensitivities, whether it'll tell you if a signal's there, but only the doctor can really know if it's subclinical or if it's really true indolent disease. But we've seen AI victories in detecting aneurysms that the doctors could not, in detecting cancers that the doctors could not, in very simply taking photographs and analyzing them to identify one skin disease over others, again, limiting and reducing the amount of useless drugs, cost, and harm to the patient that are administered. And then, very exciting, a group looking at using an iPhone camera or a cell camera in order to look at the vasculature of the eye and use algorithms to predict the correlation to heart attack risk. Just phenomenal stuff coming along with image analysis. And robotics, although very expensive currently, tech always outpaces biotech. And when you've got like a team of bioengineers working together on something, boy, it's always an exciting thing. So this is most of the robotics have been targeting amputees that still send signals. So you've heard of the phantom hand, the phantom limb. Your brain still thinks that severed hand is there. It sends the signals out. Your brain is not a deficit. It's really the hand that's gone, but the signals still travel down the arm. And this patient here has a sensor you can see on his bicep, and that's detecting the very subtle motions that are unique to every individual. That then processes the data and exchanges the data with the robotic arm. So the AI learns, as you can see, every motion that the individual is doing by using that cuff on his arm, and instructs the robotic arm what to do. Now, what I love about this is not sticking gear in the brain. If you introduce metal into your brain, I'm a neuroscientist, you induce scarring. And that actually causes a brain damage in the local area that is not reversible. And it also stops the signal interaction between the brain and the inserted metal. This is not doing that. This is a very different, highly sophisticated approach that has an external device, very sensitive device that detects the muscular and cartilage, even the skin movements that are produced by that particular individual of that particular size, whether he or she be fat or thin, etc., whether they're emaciated, whatever their physiology is, it doesn't matter. The AI detects it and then teaches the system to move the robotic arm in a way that corresponds with that sensor. Just a truly phenomenal development that was surfaced at the University of Utah. So those are a few examples of a few hot things. My point there is that AI is here. It's not coming. It's actually here. It's making extremely exciting developments that could save hundreds of billions of dollars in our system. But how is it that you manifest this potential? I think everyone that has a child knows that it is certainly what's within the kid, but it's also what is without, the external influences. And then besides those influences, we also need to direct these children to a particular environment. We put them in schools in order to learn particular things. We try to find the best schools. We try to parent in a way that is nurturing. We direct individuals to particular tasks in order to tune them from a young age. So where should we be pointing AI? It's not a surprise that the greatest benefit to the healthcare system is going to target cost reduction. There is a lot of cost to be reduced in this system. In the United States, where I live, almost $12,000 a year in healthcare cost per citizen. Very, very high. You can see the comparison to other very advanced nations. It's ridiculous how much this nation spends on healthcare, yet we're the 35th healthiest country in the world. There's a problem here. There's clearly excess in the system. An average American couple in their retirement over 65 needs around $300,000 for medical expenses. That's just extraordinary. 43% of American adults are inadequately assured. Things like getting double mastectomies if you need them, that's covered by insurance, but not the reconstructive surgery, that type of thing. 20% don't even have access to needed healthcare. Bankruptcies, 62% of them are due to healthcare bills in this nation. Just an extraordinary figure. So the increase in expenditures in this sector have just gotten out of hand. There's clearly a rationale to target cost reduction here. And what can we do? I'm not going to talk forever about these things, but these are a list well known to the healthcare community of things that we could do to reduce cost in this system. Capping hospital prices. Commercial plans pay far more than government-sponsored plans, and they can charge whatever they want. Focus on preventative care in order to shift the field from managing disease to preventing disease. Reducing Medicare Advantage overpayments, which is just rampant in this system, and it actually reduces incentives for innovation. Equalizing payments from Medicare so that payments for similar procedures are the same rather than how they are now, varying very widely. Eliminating unnecessary tests and procedures, controlling the cost of prescription drugs, where drug companies can charge whatever they want. Eliminating the prescription of ineffective drugs, enhancing screening. 1/3 are ineffective, and that is a waste of money, but it also exposes the patients to unnecessary side effects. Administrative cost is higher in this country than any other country. More than 1/3 of our healthcare dollars go to administrative costs because of that great experiment America did by privatizing its healthcare system and therefore duplicating administrations rather than having them centralized. Treat hospitals as a last resort. About half of our expenses go to hospitals, but we should be putting alternative care options in, like technologies, telehealth, AI interactions, etc. Taking excessive costs out of the system, like overcharges that happen for privates very, very rampantly. Promoting competition and incentivizing and spending targets. Reducing prices through regulation, because frankly, companies can do what they'd like, and promoting payment reform. So the question with these standard methods to reduce costs across the board are, how is it then that artificial intelligence could help here? So just a quick glance at what AI is currently doing in the healthcare system, just to show you that it is possible. So AI has been very, very successful in the supply chain, reducing redundancies in operations, enhancing supply chain forecasting. It's been extremely successful in population health management, identifying chronic risk factors early by looking at populations of a particular indication like cancer or heart attack, etc. Decreasing preventable readmissions to the hospital, predicting patient no-shows, improving clinical design and decision-making. Very efficient methods of doing this, so there's less visits, less wastage. Finding patterns of high utilization to schedule appointments, and very importantly, closing clinical care gaps. There's a real drift in the world of advanced nations to use the emergency rooms because of insurance problems, much of it. And the emergency rooms deal with an acute issue, When that acute issue turns into a less acute issue, so it's managed or becomes chronic, they get shifted into a regular hospital bed. But there's often very, very critical care gaps that are exist there. They are not attended to, and it causes a tremendous increase in the amount of time it takes for the healthcare staff to attend to these things. Very, very accurate and helpful AI aids are existing in this sector. In reimbursement management, maximizing the prioritization of high value claims for insurance companies, managing documentation to action claims that can actually be denied or won, checking claim status early, financially clearing patients, etc. And then the last one is just utilization of healthcare. It's called utilization management, reducing costs by reducing care delays, streamlining point of care authorizations and submissions to deliver frictionless approvals and facilitate seamless clinical reviews. So we have seen AI being very actively deployed in this method of targeting cost reductions. So I would like to leave you with a few very poignant to-dos. We have much to manifest in order to get AI in healthcare the norm. I think first and foremost, we must attend to regulation in this sector. We need regulation. We need cohesive international standards for medical software. This has been advanced over the past 10 years, guiding software developers towards regulatory compliance. However, artificial intelligence does introduce new risks that are not addressed by current regulatory guidance. And these are things like design and manufacturing norms, negative interactions with other devices, or permitted diagnostic functions. What are we going to allow this AI to diagnose without a healthcare professional there? In the United States, China, Japan, South Korea, regulatory bodies have published discussion papers for a proposed regulatory framework for modifications to AI and machine learning. And the EU, just about a little over a year ago, issued a legislative proposal in this regard. But it's really just a start. There is currently little or no policy or standardization, and most countries have not begun the process at all. There's another major category that needs work here is standardization. The AI build is coming from a very motivated commercial sector, but it is highly varied and it is evolving extremely fast. We need training. We need to focus on training. Doctors just don't have the time, and the AI sector is dynamic. It will be very important to pick what training takes place on what AI so as to not overburden healthcare professionals. You can see the crushing effect that our current environment has on healthcare professionals. They have far, far less time. There's more staff leaving the healthcare profession than at any other time in our modern history. So unnecessarily burdening the healthcare professionals is going to be detrimental. However, introducing AI that has efficiencies and then demanding that training is, of course, going to be cost saving. Reimbursement is another area we have to pay attention to. Responsible adoption of healthcare artificial intelligence requires that AI systems and companies are incentivized financially. They must be reimbursed well. The development of sustainable reimbursement for future AI services will encourage AI companies to innovate and thereby help save money in the healthcare system. So we need a framework for analytically determining the value and cost of each unique AI service so that the optimum balance is found in reimbursing affected stakeholders, patients, providers, the legislators, the payers, and the AI creators. And then we've got to a rather sticky one of ethical accountability. Excuse me. Who's accountable when AI goes wrong? A chatbot that was designed by Microsoft to mimic a teenager began spewing racist hate speech within hours of its release online, and Microsoft immediately took it down. Another system which Amazon designed to help its recruiting efforts, we've got an HR issue here, inadvertently discriminated against female applicants. Amazon didn't release it. The point being here that who's accountable when AI goes wrong, when it is released, when it is used, especially in an environment that could kill people? There will be a massive systemic disruption in the healthcare field and massive benefit to those who lead. But along with that comes the liability for the consequences of its use. Transparency. Since the very first promising results of AI in healthcare, the black box problem became relevant. Exactly how does AI come to its decisions? What are the algorithms involved? Many of us will ask, what is an algorithm? Where were the inputs? What are they that trained the system? Transparency in healthcare is crucial because people's lives and health are at stake. In the event of something going wrong, healthcare professionals, they have to know how to prevent it in the future. In the case of AI, it's not always possible to trace how the algorithmic input turned into the specific output and what factors contributed to it. Another issue comes up particular to AI in healthcare with respect to privacy. So most AI technologies are owned and operated by private companies. Thus, such corporations, sometimes clinics and public bodies, they'll have a greater than typical role in obtaining, utilizing, and protecting patient health information. So that raises a lot of privacy issues relating to the implementation of it, but also data security. And then lastly, governance. A governance framework will help prevent unintended biases in AI modeling. Governance framework can also help prevent algorithmic drift in AI models as they learn and change the inputs. Frankly, they put new additional inputs in it and change their own algorithms. By implementing stringent AI governance policies, companies can get ahead of these mishaps and also get ahead of lawsuit scenarios. So, I posit that we're currently in a very familiar situation in healthcare, in which regulation and oversight are well behind the technologies that they govern. And until they catch up, AI in healthcare will be disappointingly underemployed, and intelligence augmentation is certainly going to continue to be our athlete. So by way of takeaways, if I may, one of the things that struck me while I was preparing for this and looking at the AI field is that a lot of things which say they're AI certainly are not AI. I've seen this in the stem cell field as well, where you have I'm a stem cell researcher, and I can tell you that about 1 in 20 stem cell programs you hear are real. This topic of AI in healthcare is very similar to that. Most AI programs are complicated computing projects that are looking for money. I think that the next major takeaway is that there is enough money in this system. Think about this, $1.27 trillion in revenues in the healthcare sector and $137 billion in revenue in the AI sector. This is an important takeaway for regulators and governments, that I believe that there is enough money there, and it is a horrendously poorly regulated system with a lot of leakiness in it. There's a lot of trimming that could be done, tons of money to motivate. And clearly, as I've shown you, the motivation is there. AI will infiltrate healthcare. Whether you believe it or not, whether you're thinking that a video or two of a robotic hand is cool or not, you have to understand that AI is and will continue to infiltrate healthcare. This is coming whether you accept it or not. And lastly, and I think most importantly for this audience, efficiencies can be expedited. Whether your motivation for expediting artificial intelligence in healthcare is political, whether it's financial, monetary gain to yourself or your own company, or whether it's pure research and discovery, you can benefit and better this sector. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's attention.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hans Kirstad. I think a fascinating presentation. I think you covered a lot of ground here.
Thank you.
The amount of data, the challenges involved, some of the solutions actually in healthcare, things around the cost, accessibility, even things that I think we don't talk enough about, which is like managing the operations supply chain, the governance side. I mean, I'm very impressed you're able to get all that together in such a short presentation.
Thank
But
you, Neil.
we've already got some great questions coming in, and those of you that have questions, please do share them. But let me kick it off with one that's kind of interesting based on you're talking about the ethical use here. So we have one person asking, is there an internationally accepted AI ethics framework?
That's a good question. I don't believe there's an international body yet that is dictating policy in various nations, but there certainly are a series of think tanks around that are looking at this. None of them have yet instructed regulation and affected it in countries.
I think that's a tall order, unfortunately. I think if we all thought about it for a second, we all have a kind of our personal code of conduct. So coming together with an AI ethics framework will be a challenge. Not impossible, but definitely a challenge.
And one thing to add to that, as I was making the point here, one of the points was that the healthcare sector has not adequately embraced AI, but the commercial or industrial sector certainly has and is pushing. They're developing things. So whether the healthcare sector and regulators are ready or not, they are developing. The industry is developing its own efficiencies on their own, selling them to hospital administrators who are choosing, in some cases, to put them into place. Now, these are individual companies with their own ethics, with their own levels of accountability that are not standardized. So until this ethical responsibility becomes regulated in some way with a framework, and I agree that overregulation is terrible. Under-regulation is equally terrible. And if we leave this ethical accountability unattended to, I think that we will have disasters in the system, breaches of, the honor code of medicine.
Yeah, that's something we got to safeguard against. I am kind of curious. So that, we have a couple of questions around this. We always talk about, some of these challenges, and we're kind of, we're in kind of the infancy on some of these areas in healthcare. Yet it seems like we've made a lot of advancement. I mean, just in some of the solutions you shared with us, the robotic arm, the drug discovery. Is that just the tip of the iceberg? I mean, how much is this going to transform the industry?
Neil, I don't think there's another singular label you could put on anything besides perhaps penicillin that's going to be more influential than AI in healthcare. It's better. It's better than humans. It's better at the complicated stuff of combining the data, looking at the images. Humans just can't read that much anymore. I've been a professor my whole career, and it's extraordinary. I leave my desk every day when I go home with undone things. The more educated one gets, the more one realizes how ignorant they are. And that is just the case. AI does not have that problem. Look at Watson and diagnosing that leukemia patient. Phenomenal example of the synthesis of just an unfathomable amount of billions of data points in order to treat an individual human. So whether it's what I consider, forgive me, all you administrators in the world, the boring stuff and I believe me, I do a lot of this too, but, looking at the applications of AI in the actual administration of healthcare, and whether that's looking at supply chain, whether that's looking at pays and flow of patients, population management, reimbursement, etc. In my view, I think the view of the robot is far cooler, that Watson is far cooler. I love that stuff. But even with the, boring administrative stuff, it's leaps and bounds ahead in efficiency. So we're going to see AI Infiltrate, whether we like it or not. And it's going to have betterment in both the administrative as well as the diagnostic and work, and then very, very soon, the application of medicines.
I got to ask, because you cited the 20 million medical studies that Watson has read, at least back then. Could a human doctor, clinician even do that? Could they even read that many?
It's impossible. And I have to say that when I was a professor, I used to challenge my students to read one single scientific paper a day, and no one could do it.
Wow.
You do it in your crunch periods. You're going to, defend your thesis tomorrow or next month. You're going to read a ton of papers. When I'm writing, I can digest and eat 20, 30 articles in a day and just read, and my brain just gets hyper and I can do it. But I tell you, 2 weeks later, I remember very little of it. And I'm also biased. I'm looking as an individual with my own motivations. I'm looking for the words that fit my hypothesis. And that's the death knell of R&D and medical application. You do not bias. You need to keep an open mind. Humans don't do that despite our best efforts. As a scientist, I'm aware that we put in place processes to stop bias, knowing that even if we know we need to stop bias, our natural tendencies are towards getting what we want, making happen what we want. AI doesn't suffer that problem. It analyzes those 20 million articles in a blink. It remembers them all, and it has absolutely no input bias whatever.
Oh, that's the advantage. We always talk about hybrid intelligence, augmenting human abilities with machine capabilities. Yeah. We have another great question here. What is the biggest advantage for people on the patient's side to use AI products in healthcare?
Well, I think right now it would be efficiencies in the system. I'm calling that the boring administrative stuff, but AI is doing things in the healthcare system that the patient is unaware of, but will expedite their care. That's probably the first thing that the patient won't see, but they could experience as AI takes its claws into healthcare a little more. And then the other thing is going to be proper drug prescription. Proper drug prescription, it fails 30% of the time. So, you go to the hospital 10 times, 3 of those, you're getting the wrong drug. And that's just a fact. It's very, very well proven. And what happens when you get the wrong drug? Your indication that brought you to take that drug is still running rampant in your system. Are you going to die in the meantime before you get the right drug? Is your disease or injury going to get worse and perhaps unrepairable if you continue to take the wrong drug? And then the third thing, of course, is side effects. Almost every drug in the medical profession has side effects of some sort. And if you're taking a drug that doesn't work, you're probably going to increase your dose to try to get it to work, and therefore your side effects are going to increase. So for the patient, it's danger. It is truly health danger not to use AI, because AI can actually reduce the amount of prescriptions that are incorrect, therefore getting you the drug that you need quicker and decreasing the side effects of whatever drug dose or variations of drug that you may get. So I think the patient's really going to see that. Proper diagnoses is, of course, another thing. As AI ekes itself into image analysis more and more, the doctor's going to walk into that room to make a diagnosis and already have AI telling them what the images say. They can also look at the images themselves and remember from their school training that, oh yes, that little gray area right there might be a tumor. But AI has already said, doctor, look right there. You've got a tumor. Probably confirm it. And so it directs and guides for proper diagnosis. Treatments soon. I don't think we're really going to see a lot of new drugs put on the market terribly soon, just simply born and bred by AI, but they are certainly coming.
Well, even diagnosis is a great place to start.
Huge place to start, yeah.
Here's a fascinating question. Could AI be used to explore and discover new drugs, treatments, and breakthroughs by combining Western and traditional Eastern medicine?
That's such an important point, and I think it's unequivocally yes. So I'm a classically trained Western PhD, and I'm in the medical care profession. I run clinical trials all over the nation and the world. So I'm doing a lot of medical work as well. And I can tell you that my biased view from being a Western educated healthcare professional is that that type of work, I don't want to say Eastern medicine, but natural medicines and that type of thing, and botanicals, that there's a lot of silliness in there. And there is certainly silliness in there. Drugs that are at such trace levels that they cannot conceivably have a physiological effect. Applications that work in a good 30% of people, some natural medicine that works in 30% of people. But you have to understand that placebo effect works in 30% of people. You take salt water or sugar water and give it to someone and tell them it's a drug, 30% of the time that drug's going to work. It's extraordinary. So it's really hard in these natural medicines to really remove the silly stuff from the real stuff. And certainly there are real examples of strong medicines in that branch of medicine. Aspirin, which came from willow bark, is the world's best example. That was a natural medicine that then the active ingredient was purified, and now it's a conventional pharmaceutical drug. But basically, the wheat from the chaff. How do you get that, nonsense out of the way in that sector? And don't get me wrong, there's nonsense in conventional pharmaceutical drugs as well. But how do you get it out of the way? It's education, it's reading, it's that compendium of, call it the population R&D that we have in our current medical literature. But again, the physician only has those 5 hours a month in order to catch up with it. AI can help by reading and digesting all of that and assigning believability, assigning a score of whether it was done with placebo controls. Easy for AI to do. Very complex, frankly, but AI can read those papers and see if there were appropriate controls. They can see what the outcome measures were. They accepted, or were they just the view of some guy that was sitting and looking at it? Or, were they regulatory body validated outcome measures? AI can do all that. So I think it is this adoption of the realm of the unstructured clinical notes that we now know artificial intelligence uses to enhance accuracy. We know that that's the case. It's not a theory. It is certainly true. And it is very much applicable to natural and homeopathic medicines.
Well, fantastic. So here's an interesting question. So it's about Andrew Go, who talks about the proof of concept to production gap. So basically something that works on paper, when we try to actually build it or put it into practical use, there are some challenges in trying to do that. And they're talking about there's many projects that are not integrated in clinical workflows. What rationale you might give to explain why this gap exists in healthcare?
Well, I think, my first thought is that it's just hard. Like it's hard to invent a drug for cancer. It's hard to do what you're talking about. It's very, very difficult to address those gaps and do it in a systematic, experimental manner when you're dealing with live patients that require proper care right now. So layering on these systems onto conventional medical treatment, but doing so in a manner that is controlled, like a proper FDA or regulatory body run clinical trial, takes a lot of time. And sometimes it's not doable. Sometimes it's in practice that the data slowly comes out, imperfect studies, but again, population analyses of those studies can draw proper conclusions. But unfortunately, a lot of it is just because clinical trials are hard. That's my business. I run clinical trials. I've had 17 FDA approvals. Thank goodness, knock on wood, no rejections. And I can tell you that they're hard. They're expensive. They're costly. There's unknown barriers. So you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in something, and you may have a standard of care change that derails your work. So I think this question, that it's a very, very good question. And part of the answer why it's taken so long is that a lot of these cutting edge technologies try to avoid going through the clinic for all those reasons and more that I just said. It's expensive. They don't know how to do it. And frankly, the regulatory bodies over the last few years, when we've seen the greatest development of AI, have been overburdened and understaffed because of COVID, because of other socioeconomic things that have been happening in different nations. But the understaffed and overburdened regulatory agencies are being felt worldwide. And that's another reason why these, more startup technologies are avoiding it, besides it just being really tough and really expensive.
I mean, that makes sense. We all live with the triple constraints. We only have so much staff, so much budget to deploy. And you talked earlier about some of the challenges with the data being siloed. And we all need to remember that while AI can help us do lots of things, we still need to teach it. So if we don't fully understand something, how do we teach that to a machine?
So true. And it's funny that we're talking about this problem that AI is facing, but and it's a very good question. But AI can also be proven to be a solution to it. AI is capable of digesting so many studies and unstructured notes. By pulling them together, it actually can form a better database for judgment of a particular new indication, either being compliant with regulatory policies or not. They may be not directly relevant to an FDA's approval of a technology, but they can certainly be regarded as supporting data.
I know we're running a little over time here. I'm just going to wrap it up with one last question, everybody, and then we'll jump on for the networking session on the neural network after this. But I typically tend to hate these types of future-looking questions, Hans, so I apologize, but you have to bust out your crystal ball a bit here. How, in your opinion, how long do you think it'll take until AI will be allowed to overtake not only diagnosis but actual treatment of diseases? So putting more of the decision making in the hands of the machine than the human.
Wow, tough question. And I'm not dodging it, but I'm gonna apply that question to two different scenarios. I think in your typical hospital, it's going to be a while. I think it's going to be beyond 10 years when fully independent treatment is administered. I think it'll start within 5 years, and we're going to start to see it infiltrate full diagnosis and full treatment, but it'll be few and far between. The other scenario or context that I think begets a different answer is things like space travel, things like rural applications, situations where that full compendium of competence in the healthcare system that we see in our local hospital in California with millions of people in the immediate vicinity and high paid doctors and nurses and excellent gear. That situation is drastically different from a rural clinic in Senegal. And so we do have contextual considerations here. And I would think actually that AI is going to make within 5 years a really serious application in these more rural settings where there really aren't the options of skilled medical expertise. And the diagnosis, like the antibody resistance, is happening now, and it's being deployed now. And so that is truly in the diagnosis, because you're diagnosing not only in a bug infection, but you're prescribing a medicine. So there's an example in the rural setting where we have AI in healthcare infiltrating to a much greater degree. And it is ethical because there is no other alternative. And it's all about a risk-benefit analysis in healthcare. And I think that given the expertise that we have in these highly populated advanced economy cities, where we have the best of the world, best of the world's healthcare, the risk benefit is a different analysis, in that we need to be cautious, put on more ethical controls, look at reimbursement, etc. But in the rural setting, in space travel, I think we are going to have to relax that bar. And frankly, that's an opportunity for the AI industry.
Well, that's awesome. Fantastic presentation, incredible
Thanks.
discussion. We will be continuing this forward on the networking session, so just stick around. But my thanks on behalf of all of us, Dr. Kirstad. And I'm going to flip it back to Anna to, well, let us know the next steps here.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. After the networking session, we invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.